Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are jumping into something. Well, it's a really fascinating and, I think, quite intense piece of analysis.
It really is.
We're looking at a critical review of recent scientific paper. And on the surface, it seems to be all about hard biology. But it very quickly becomes this deep philosophical question.
A question about how we even define difference itself.
Exactly.
That's right. The core subject is this unexpected intersection of dermatology. So the science of skin and psychiatry, specifically autism spectrum disorder, or ASD.
And we're basing this on a 2023 paper, right? It's called Link Between the Skin and Autism Spectrum Disorder.
That's the one.
So our mission today for you is really twofold. First, we have to unpack what the researchers actually found, the specific, quantifiable biological links between the skin and ASD.
But that's just the first part.
Right. The real mission, the one the critical reviewer is really pushing us to confront, is the why. Why are researchers so focused on skin right now? And what are the implications when science tries to sort of reduce a complex lived experience down to a measurable surface trait?
And the reviewer sets that stage immediately. They note that this research, while it looks new and kind of expansive, is actually moving in, and I'm quoting here, a very old direction.
An old direction? What does that mean?
It means the traditional hunt for biological reductionism, this idea that a complex, multifaceted condition can be simplified, that it can be anchored to a single physical measurement.
Okay, let's unpack this, and let's start exactly where the original paper started, which is on the biological surface.
Yeah.
If someone is looking for these physical connections to ASD, why the skin? I mean, what were they actually measuring?
Well, the paper's objective was to do a systematic review. So they were gathering and synthesizing existing findings that connect ASD to three main areas of skin biology. Those are skin barrier dysfunction, inflammation, and general immune signaling. It's really important to note they weren't collecting new samples or anything. They were connecting dots that were already out there in the literature.
And what's interesting, the source critique points this out, is that this material isn't wildly speculative. These aren't crazy theories.
No, not at all. These are standard, concrete biomedical measurements, things dermatologists use literally every day in their practice.
So let's break that down. What were the main categories of markers?
So first, they looked at associations related to skin barrier dysfunction. This includes things we can all see like eczema, but also more subtle markers, specifically transepidermal water loss.
Transepidermal water loss.
Yeah.
TEWL, right?
Yeah.
For you, the listener, who might not be familiar with that phrase, it's basically a measure of how much water vapor is passively evaporating through your skin.
Exactly. It's a very clean, very quantifiable way to measure how well the skin's barrier is sealed, its integrity.
So if you have a high TEWL reading.
A high TEWL means the barrier is compromised. It's leaky. The skin is losing water faster than it should, which can make it more reactive to the environment. And the source showed the researchers found clear associations between these markers and ASD.
If you connect that to the sensory world for a moment, a compromised barrier, well, that means the skin is constantly sending signals, right? Itches, dryness, vulnerability. That feels like a pretty significant finding on its own.
It really does. And beyond just the physical barrier, the review also noted associations with inflammation and immune signaling.
Okay, so now we're going deeper, not just the surface integrity.
Right. Here, the researchers were looking at internal biochemical measurements, things like cytokines and the surface chemistry of the skin, specifically its pH level.
Cytokines are a bit technical. Can you give us a quick analogy for what those are?
Of course. Think of cytokines as the body's tiny little signaling flags. When there's tissue damage or inflammation, these flags go up and they tell the immune system, hey, respond over here.
So they're communication proteins.
Crucial communication proteins. And the research here is noting that those signaling flags, they seem to be flying higher or maybe just differently in certain associations with ASD.
So we have a pretty clear link then. We've got concrete, quantifiable markers, eczema, TEWL, cytokines, pH, all things that, as the review says, live comfortably within biomedical measurement.
That really grounds the discussion. The data exists, it's not being invented.
But that brings us to the crucial pivot point.
Right. Because if you only focus on the what, you completely miss the insight that the reviewer is providing. We have to transition from the data itself to the choice of the data, not what are they studying, but why this.
Why skin? Why now?
Exactly.
And this is where we really hit that aha moment for you as a learner. It's not about denying the biology. It's about questioning the whole methodology and the implications of picking this specific organ to study.
Absolutely. The source material gives us the key reasons why skin is so appealing for researchers looking for a physical anchor for conditions like ASD, conditions that have, historically been defined by behavior and subjective reporting.
And it boils down to three main characteristics. First, its visibility.
You can see skin, you can photograph it, you can chart its conditions. It gives you undeniable external proof of something.
Okay. Second, it's highly accessible.
Unlike studying, say, deep brain structures or relying on really expensive and invasive genetic sequencing, the skin is it's right there. It's our largest organ, immediately available for testing.
And the third factor, which is maybe the most strategically attractive for psychiatry, is that it is quantifiable.
Quantifiable is the magic word. Researchers can use simple tools to measure pH or water loss. They can take tiny, non-invasive biopsies to measure cytokine levels. They get clean numbers.
And for a field like biomedical science that's looking for objective data in the, let's face it, often subjective world of psychiatric diagnosis,
Visible, accessible, quantifiable skin it's an irresistible research target.
and the consequence of that choice is really striking. The reviewer argues that skin offers psychiatry a tangible surface that autism has historically resisted. It provides a hard, external, physical proof point to anchor a diagnosis that used to rely on, nuanced observation and self-report.
And that shift from the internal lived experience to the external objective measurement, that's where the critical analysis really digs in. If you want a diagnosis to be taken seriously in the medical world, having an objective physical marker carries just immense weight.
Let me just push back on the critic for a second, though,
Right,
because
okay.
this seems important. If your goal is truly objective medical treatment or maybe developing targeted drugs, don't you need quantifiable output? I mean, how can a subjective conversation replace a clean pH number or a cytokine count? Isn't objective measurement a good thing for clinical care?
That's an excellent point, and it's precisely where the reviewer focuses their critique. They aren't rejecting the usefulness of the number. They're rejecting the power dynamic that's created by relying only on the number.
The power dynamic.
Yes. The problem is that skin measurement, as the source notes, can be done without conversation and, crucially, without having to ask autistic people how their bodies feel or what those sensations do for them.
Wow. That distinction it's profound. You're measuring an external biological output, a skin cell's reaction, but you never have to engage with the person's internal reality.
You get a data point.
But you miss the context entirely.
You miss the entire qualitative context. I mean, when you remove the need for conversation, you miss essential information. For example, okay, so TEWL is high. Is that just a marker of biological difference? Or is it a source of constant discomfort that requires specific sensory coping mechanisms?
You get the number, but you lose the function. You lose the experience of that difference.
And the measurement becomes this reductionist stand-in for the entire person.
Which brings us to the reviewer's explicit position. This is, and they say this directly, not a rejection of biology, but a refusal of reduction.
Exactly. It's not about ignoring that biological differences exist. It's an argument against dermatologists hunting biomarkers in psychiatry and trying to reduce the totality of autistic life to just these surface markers.
This is where we need to really spend some time unpacking the reviewer's view of skin itself. Because they argue skin is way more complex than just a passive surface waiting to be measured.
Right. They frame it as being inherently regulatory and relational.
Let's define those. What does it mean for skin to be regulatory?
Regulatory means it's constantly managing the body's internal state in response to the world outside. Think of it like a body thermostat and a defense system all rolled into one. It regulates temperature, it keeps pathogens out, it manages moisture, it processes all the sensory data coming in. It is constantly working to maintain balance.
Okay, so if we apply that regulatory role to ASD, and we find that, say, an autistic person has higher TEWL or a different cytokine profile, is that automatically a sign of pathology? Or could it just be a sign that their regulatory system is configured differently, that it's working harder to manage a different sensory baseline?
That is the core question. It forces us to think about the cost of, quote, mistaking regulation for pathology.
Right.
The source is suggesting that these inherent body processes, the things necessary for regulation, are being measured, and just because they fall outside a neurotypical norm, they are automatically labeled as a disease marker.
And then there's the relational aspect of skin. That's even more compelling to me.
The relational aspect just emphasizes that skin is the dynamic boundary that meets the world. It facilitates sensation, touch, interaction. Think of how the difference between a soft blanket and a scratchy shirt tag, that response your body has, that's the skin's relational data input.
That makes the argument so tangible. If you have a different threshold for sensory input, a different relational boundary, and a researcher only measures the output, say, a localized inflammatory response,
But they never ask about the input.
the experience of that sensation, you're getting a totally incomplete and maybe even misleading picture. They've defined the reaction as a physical flaw, not as a different way of relating to the world.
Exactly. The reviewer argues that when researchers reduce skin to just a source of biomarkers, they strip away all of its dynamic regulatory and relational functions. It makes it easier to just define it as evidence against autistic life, which is the phrase the source warns us against.
This is such a powerful critique because it's not just about this one paper, it's about the entire philosophy of diagnosis.
Yeah.
By prioritizing these objective external metrics like TEWL or pH, we risk overlooking the complex, internal, and subjective systems of sensory management that are fundamental to autistic experience.
It really forces us to consider the true purpose of the measurement in the first place. Is it designed to help the person understand their own body and environment better? Or is it designed purely to find an easy physical category to put them in?
The first one centers the experience. The second one centers the data.
And the data-centric approach, in this case, relies on the fact that the skin is so visible and so easily quantifiable. It provides a shortcut, doesn't it? And a shortcut that bypasses conversation and consent, just as the critique noted.
So the critical voice here is just essential for any learner. It means we have to acknowledge the biological associations are real. I mean, the skin and the nervous and immune systems are deeply connected.
Of course.
But we have to refuse to allow those associations to become the sole reductive definition of the condition. We have to resist that urge to simplify complex human experience just for the convenience of an objective measurement. Okay, so we've synthesized two crucial tracks of knowledge for you today. First, there's the scientific track. There are quantifiable, measurable biomedical associations between specific skin markers, like transepidermal water loss, cytokines, eczema, and ASD. The data is there, it's real, and it's interesting.
But second, and just as important, is the critical track. This necessary question about the ethics and the scope of research that seeks to define a complex condition just through a quantifiable surface. The critique is about the powerful refusal to let internal, subjective, lived experience be silenced by external, objective measurement.
Our deep dive really shows that this hunt for biomarkers, while it provides valuable biological context, it has to be coupled with a deep ethical awareness of reductionism. We always have to be asking what information gets lost when we measure the surface without ever consulting the interior.
And so we'll leave you with this provocative thought to consider. If the skin is fundamentally regulatory and relational, what other biological measurements are we currently relying on that might be misinterpreting or reducing complex human function? You could think about chronic pain or mental health assessments that rely only on hormone levels.
Where is that line? The line between measuring a difference in internal regulation, which might just be variation, and defining a pathology, which requires intervention. And where should we, as learners and as critical thinkers, draw the boundary between verifiable science, personal experience, and the final definition of human difference?
Thank you for taking this crucial deep dive with us.
We look forward to seeing where you take this knowledge next.